Welcome, everyone, to the next edition of Unscripted and Unstoppable Conversations for Women Navigating Reinvention, Identity Shift, Relationships, Healing, and Becoming After 50. I am your host, Laureen Quick. Today's conversation is an especially important one, and I am honored to be joined by three guests who work in the field of elder abuse awareness, prevention, and victim support. Elder Abuse Awareness Month actually is observed throughout the month of June, and the month focuses on recognizing, preventing, and addressing the mistreatment of older adults, including physical, emotional, and financial abuse. This episode is going to be released on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, June 15th. It is a global initiative that reminds us that every older adult deserves dignity, safety, respect, and the right to age free from abuse. The theme for 2026 is Be Bold, Age with Attitude, which I love. I love that framing because this conversation is not only about awareness, but it is also about voice, advocacy, courage, and community. Many forms of elder abuse remain hidden. We might know it as physical abuse or emotional abuse or financial exploitation or neglect or psychological manipulation and other kinds of forms of victimization that too often go unseen, unspoken, or unreported. And today we want to bring greater awareness, a greater understanding to this issue, while also offering our listeners practical awareness, support, and hope. Joining me today is Chris Parish. He is the Supervisor of Adult Protective Services, and he works with the Southwest Idaho Area Agency on Aging. And Chris is with us via mic, no image, just so you're aware he is here. Trina Allen is also joining us today, and she is the Executive Director for Ada County Victim Services Center, and she is also a licensed clinical social worker. And then Angie Hudson is also joining us. She is a licensed clinical social worker as well and retired therapist. All three of these individuals have an immense wealth of knowledge in this area and have agreed to come together to share and help us understand more about what I consider to be a very important topic for women as we age in our 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. So just to start out, thank you all for being here today, for the work that you do, and for your willingness to help us understand more about this issue. Before we begin, I also want you to know that we will be sharing resources in the show notes to this episode, and there will be links available that you can click on for more information or to make connections as appropriate. Beyond that, let's get started. I would like to throw out the first question, and Chris, I'll have you start, and then we'll
Okay.
move into a conversation. How do each of you define elder abuse, and what are some of the most common forms of elder abuse that may not be recognized right off the bat?
Well, I'll kick it off. First of all, just thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So from the APS perspective, we do have specific statutes that address each of the maltreatments that we investigate. But I think just in summary, the way I would define elder abuse is it's intentional or negligent infliction of pain or injury to an older adult, or it would be depriving them of basic necessities such as food, clothing, shelter, or reasonably necessary medical care that's needed to sustain their life and health.
Okay. And Trina or Angie, do you have anything else you want to add to that? I mean, it sounds very complete.
Yeah, no, and thank you. want to springboard off what Chris said. Thank you for hosting us today to talk about such an important topic. I would absolutely concur with everything that Chris talks about. I do think one of the things that we don't talk about as much is the financial abuse component. We certainly know that the financial piece can be really impactful for our older populations, which I think is so incredibly sad when people have worked their entire life to build their nest egg and they're living on such a small income. And to have folks that, whether they are family members or care providers, come in and you know, and really access the money that they have left. And most older folks are not returning to the workforce to rebuild that
Mhm.
nest egg. So
And I agree with all that Chris and Trina said. As a retired psychotherapist, as well as a woman in her 70s, um, I I hope what I can bring today is a clinical perspective, but also what it's like navigating my life being 70 and moving forward. And I think that education is, and knowledge is power to help us all age well. Um, I, from a clinical perspective, what I've seen when I was doing therapy are individuals coming in and saying, it's a betrayal of trust. I trusted this person,
Mhm.
be it my husband, my child, somebody calling on the phone saying, I'm from Medicare, um, I need your social security number, as well as seeing women in clinic in their 50s being scammed and giving away a large amount of money. I mean, really taking away their nest egg, kind of like what Trina was saying. It's really, I'm just excited to be part of this to help educate your listeners of how subtle sometimes those that it can start slipping in in individuals' life.
It's funny. When I listened to Chris talk, it was like one thing that really struck me was, well, I always think of abusers as being very intentional people. Like they know what they're doing and they do it. But it sounded like from your definition that you offered to us, Chris, it can just be simply neglect. I
Yeah.
mean, not simply neglect isn't even the right way to say that. It's just someone without any forethought thinking about the ethical responsibilities that they have towards their loved one or
Mhm.
the person that they're interacting with. So it's not like they're intentionally going out and trying to abuse this person physically, emotionally, or financially, but then little things just start to evolve, and pretty soon it turns into this big mess
Right.
that legally would be defined as abuse.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
From the APS perspective, we don't really judge intent, but yes, negligence absolutely plays a huge role in some of the forms of maltreatment that we see.
yeah. Uh, Someone who's supposed to be doing this but doesn't because they're busy with their own life, and so they neglect the person that they need to attend to. So that is abuse, as well as someone who intentionally steals your money.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the financial side, I think also, Trina, that you mentioned, Angie, that you also talked about, we, I mean, we think about being scammed, that can happen to anyone, but an older adult is more vulnerable because they are more trusting and they're in a place of dependency sometimes, many times, that causes them to feel like they have to trust. They're not in a position to say, no, you can't help me because I don't trust you. They need the help. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think another thing when we talk about neglect that's often not recognized is self-neglect.
mhm,
The victim will just kind of become more isolated and just shut down instead of being actively engaged. And I think that can be overlooked. That's why I think it's so important to have people connecting with that individual, be it in your neighborhood or wherever you're at, to give them a piece of dignity and that their stories are still valuable,
Mm-hmm.
because that self-neglect can be a real big thing.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
And so having a system in place where you've got checks and balances, where multiple people are watching out, and then take action when they have concerns is really a helpful thing. You know,
Absolutely.
they always say we age so much better and live much longer in a healthy way when we have a community around us that loves us and supports us. It's not just I rely on one other person to help me.
That's so true. Absolutely. I don't know how you feel about that, Trina or Chris, but I see that as very important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Having a support network keeps people thriving and living well.
Yeah. And I'm 67, and even now, when I see my doctor, she's always asking, "Has anyone been harming you? Do you have people that you can trust?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I do, but But then it's like at least the doctors are also in on this now. They're trying to really make sure that someone's asking the question.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love it. I love that your doctor's checking. I think that's great. Very
yeah.
thorough.
Every visit, every visit, she has asked that question. So, yeah, the word's getting out.
Good,
That's great.
good.
Yeah, it is. Well, let me go on to the next question I wanted to ask. Um, what do you think so if someone is watching out, what are the subtle or overlooked signs that something might be wrong with an older adult in your life, a neighbor or a family member?
I would say behavior change. If behavior starts to change, maybe they're losing interest in activities they would normally enjoy. They start to isolate. I think those are all major red flags that something could be happening.
Mhm.
Whether
Okay.
it's a health issue or someone is engaging in abuse, neglect, exploitation. Maybe it is just a situation of self-neglect. Those would all be major red flags for me.
So major change in behavior.
Yep.
I think it's hands down, when we look at psychological and emotional abuse, we don't see, the public doesn't see, or maybe a doctor doesn't see um, signs of abuse, being they have a bruise or, um, a cut or whatever. When we're looking at that emotional piece, it's like what Chris said, people just really start to pull inward. I call it kind of shrinking, just getting small, losing their voice. And uh, yeah, those are the things I would look for with a family member, neighbor, or whatever. If you notice that behavior change, uh, pay close attention.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would say too, sometimes we're able to really recognize it in during conversation. So if they're maybe, so we've already noticed that we have some isolation or we have some behavior change, but also when we are interacting with not only just our older community, but with anyone in our community, if you're noticing some subtle changes in their conversation, and maybe it's more, just negative thought process, or maybe it's even having conversation of, um, where you are identifying they have lower self-worth, maybe, or always second guessing themselves. Um, and maybe that is the behavior change, right? So maybe you have somebody that when um, they were more confident, or they had a much more optimistic outlook, but then you start seeing those subtle changes in how they're just even having conversation with you, or um, the lack of interest that they had in things that before brought them joy. I think those are things to really kind of lean into. Doesn't necessarily always mean that they are being a victim of abuse, but it's an opportunity to lean in just a little bit closer and pay more attention.
And I'm not familiar, I'm not a therapist, a psychologist, anything like that, but I do know that when people suffer trauma, when they are victimized at whatever age, there is tendencies to withdraw,
Mhm,
go inward, to become self-critical, or to act out.
mhm.
So those are the kinds of changes in behavior that we're looking for as potentially as something you want to at least investigate versus, accuse. But those could be indications that there's something going on that you could find out more about and see if you could help.
Yeah. And I think too, like if you are noticing um like their personal hygiene maybe isn't what it used to be. Um, Perhaps their not only just their personal hygiene, but yeah, the lack of interest in other things,
Mhm.
not showing up like they used to. Um, all of those kinds of things are just a little indicator, a little note to self. I need to lean in a little bit closer.
Okay, that's good. I remember I had a neighbor once years ago that were older, and as you were all talking this morning, they just popped into my head, and it was like, I wonder if there wasn't something going on, looking back now, with
Mhm.
with actually the spouse, the husband potentially abusing the wife now, based
Yeah.
on just this conversation. So, um, one of the things I wanted to ask was, why is it that it happens, but people don't speak up, people don't report it? Is it shame-based here, or what is that about? Why are we not saying, help me, help me?
I think that plays a big role in it, guilt or shame. I think there's always can be a fear of retaliation because a lot of older adults become reliant upon their abusers for daily care or life-sustaining activities. There's always that emotional barrier, though, such as shame and embarrassment, especially if the alleged perp is like a family member or a friend. You know, a lot of times in the APS world, the older adults that we deal with, they may lack the ability to like advocate for themselves or to speak up due to a physical or cognitive or mental health impairment. And so that's those are all the reasons I think that kind of prevent it from being reported.
Hmm.
I think too, we live in a world of technology. Um, Sometimes folks don't even have the ability, if they, even if they wanted to, their lack of access to driving, maybe they're not driving anymore. Maybe they don't know how to use their phone anymore. Um, Maybe they lack the understanding of how to use the internet to do some research, to reach out. Um, that's why I am always advocating for our older population to really stay connected, to be lifelong learners, um, and to feel empowered that when you feel something that isn't going right, that no matter what age, that we feel empowered to say something.
Hmm.
I agree. I think some of the things to look at, when we talk about elder abuse is it's a societal issue. But if we can narrow it down, kind of like what you were saying, or, that in your neighborhood you could remember an incident that happened, right? And so often it's like, well, it's a family issue. It's not any of my business. I encountered that in my own neighborhood, and just watching the relationship as this elderly woman started to have early dementia and then just progressing. Well, we all know that that's got to be really hard on the caregiver, on that spouse. No excuse for any kind of abuse. But I kind of sat with that for quite a few days. And, I really questioned myself, what am I doing here? I have an ethical obligation to step in with courage. And so I talked to this person, and she didn't want to do anything because she thought if I go to a nursing home, it might be worse. And this person loves me. So there's that trauma bonding too. So there's a lot to kind of, start peeling away. And so I took it from the stance, let's get some more services in. So when I went and spoke to the partner, I said, it looks like you're really struggling. I would love to help if you're open to it. And he was, and it
Yeah.
did get better. So it's kind of like what Chris was saying, the more that um, you can collaborate with having, a physical therapist in there, or, you know, just start, kind of stacking up the services that can come and help the individual as well as the caregiver. Sometimes that can be really helpful.
It's I don't think anyone wants to be an abuser, right? Nobody says, "Oh, when I grow up, I want to abuse people." So of course, I love this idea of offering to help, or offering to at least help get more help in to the household so that the pressure is off. And I also think from what you just said that especially people with Alzheimer's, this is even more so the case because their mental faculty is slipping away. And less and less are they capable of even standing up for themselves because they don't know what's going on. There's just lots of confusion and limited knowledge on what could I even do anyway. And
Right.
this
And
this level.
fear,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
I was just having a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about having additional resources in before things get off track. And we really come from, which I love, we come from a society of you pull up your bootstraps. We
Mhm.
really take care of our own business, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Like we're rough and tough around here. We are meant, really, we pride ourselves in taking care of our own business. And I think there's some benefit to that. But what it does is it excludes the community. And what happens is people wait until things are off the rails or somebody is either getting hurt or now the risk has been raised so much. But if we would kind of do a mind shift of um, building that community early on and
Mhm.
getting supports in early on, and it and that's when we have more control over what it looks like. We can be part of our own design as we get older, how we want to start preparing for um, our older years. I um, I appreciate Angie saying as a woman in my 70s, right? I'm going to be 57 the end of this week. Um, and I'm thinking about this a lot for myself. What kind of life do I foresee in the next 20 to 30 years? How would I like that to look? Um, and for me, I want it to look like community. I want to have some additional support, but I know, and maybe it's from doing this work is I know in order to do that, I'm going to have to be mindful of what that looks like.
I think that's an incredible idea because, as you were speaking, Trina, it occurred to me, it's like there's really two sides to this coin. There's the other people in our lives that we love and want to protect, but then there's also ourselves. And
Mhm.
and often we don't even want to think about what it's going to be like to get old, quote unquote, to age, and to need the support of other people. So we don't plan, we don't think it through, and then we get to crisis and we don't know what to do. So taking time out and just thinking a little bit about what does my future, what will it look like for me? What do I want it to look like for me? And then what do I have to do now in my 50s, my 60s, my 70s, so that when I'm in my 90s, I've laid a foundation for that makes it a little easier for me and for everyone else around me that's helping. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a little bit, we have some ability to reduce risk, but that still, no matter what, doesn't excuse somebody for taking advantage or hurting our older population at all. But absolutely,
Yeah.
we do have some um, we have choice, and we have we have responsibility, and we also have some choice in the design of as we age.
Mm. Makes
I
sense.
agree totally. I think it's better to be proactive than reactive. It's like if you see something that just doesn't feel right, be proactive, with curiosity and love and concern, step in. And in our own lives, as we're aging, to become educated and don't put those kind of things on your loved ones of what your wishes would be. Have it all written down, kind of like what you were saying, Trina. Really have that dialogue. And I think the earlier that you do that, because life is so uncertain. Hopefully everyone can remain independent. But if you don't, what would really be your wishes be? And
Mhm.
I've let my wishes be known to my family.
Good,
It's
good.
a tough conversation, but it needs to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you uncomfortable, right? Thinking about this, but I'm always, I agree, be proactive. And I feel like the more proactive you are, the more control you have over what actually happens in the end, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the time is now to plan that and to create a vision for it versus waiting until you're in crisis mode. If you think about our culture, there is an ageism in our society where you know, older people almost become invisible. And
Mhm.
so, do you think that contributes to this problem of elder abuse, or are there things we could do to change that as a society?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just in my experience, I've seen a lot of devaluing of older adults. Like you said, kind of making them feel as if they appear invisible or
Mhm.
unheard, even burdensome at times. I think, which in turn, then that creates that environment where exploitation or other forms of maltreatment are easily overlooked or underreported. Um, and I think our population, just in the APS world, they're also a lot of times affected by functional impairments, cognitive impairments, isolation, prior trauma, exposure to domestic violence, maybe in certain situations. And I think that creates another barrier to them, like speaking up or reporting maltreatment, just kind of advocating for themselves.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
It's like I mentioned earlier, I think, and I agree with Chris, ageism is often looked at like you become invisible. What I saw in a therapeutic setting, once again, the individual coming in very vibrant during some of the initial things. And then as you started to continue to pull away all the layers, you just could see them visibly start to shrink in the chair. And that said a lot about what's really going on. So in our culture, we do treat somebody aging as invisible. And
Mhm.
I think that's why this podcast is so important. How to age with vibrance, how to be bold, and taking those necessary steps in the event that, you know, something mentally or physically starts to happen to our bodies. What do we want? But yeah, it's that shrinking. And that happens in a doctor's office. I used to take my mom to the doctor, and instead of talking to the 90-year-old woman, they would talk to me.
Hmm.
And these doctors are very well intended. I I have extreme confidence in my mother's providers at that time, but that said a lot to me. And I would say to them, Dr. So and so, I'm not the patient. Please address that. So it's just those little things that really affect a person feeling that being invisible. Hey, I'm over here. You don't have to talk to my daughter. So that's something I've noticed.
Well, and I think even for women, we experience that with our spouses as well. I've been in situations many times when I was with my husband and they would speak to my husband and not me,
Oh,
right? So being sensitive to the need to be recognized. Each person deserves the dignity of being recognized as their own person with choices and options before them. And that focus should be on them, not necessarily on, I mean, support people need to be involved, but they do not need to be ignored. The main person does not need to be ignored. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think society has a big responsibility, and we do need to make a shift. Um, I I wish that we would give more credit to our older population of the things that they have gone through, that they've experienced, that they've learned, and really take note on one of the reasons that we're here and we have um, such choice and education, and we have so many things to offer, right? But one of the reasons that we have all of that is because of our older generation, right? We need to lean in and be curious about how did they do it and just learn from them. It's important to learn about history so we don't repeat history in some areas, but also just like being curious and wanting to learn from our older population for sure. I have a
You
lot to offer.
Yes, they do. Yes, we do. I
Yes, we
can start
do.
saying we.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Like this surprises me in the sense of this would not be something I thought would come out of the conversation, but it really is from a total societal perspective
Mhm.
to rethink how we view aging and
Mhm.
how we treat the older members of our society and our world is critical to the safety, security, and dignity of all,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
We should be thinking, our minds should be thinking about how do we help support and learn from and grow instead of um, oh, it's so much work, or my neighbor needs so much, or my mom, wow, she is like taking all of my time. I don't have time to deal with everything. And really just, it's about slowing down. It's about meaningful connection.
Yeah.
It's about learning from each other. And it's
Yeah.
about humanity, honestly. I mean, what we're talking
Yes.
about is really the basis for humanity. And it is taking care of our children and it is taking care of our elderly. That's what humanity is about.
I think that both of those relationships are signs of the quality of a society.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How well the elders and the children are cared for,
Mhm.
and ultimately affects quality of life for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the theme again for this year for the Elder Abuse Awareness Month is, be bold, aging with attitude. What do you think that means from your perspective and the context of the safety, the dignity, and the self-advocacy of our elder population? What's that message?
To me, it means that it's acceptable to speak up for yourself, even if it's done in an assertive fashion. Older adults have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. So it's okay to be assertive, stand up for yourself, or say something if your needs aren't being met, you're not being cared for appropriately, or if you have some concerns about something, advocate for yourself. It's okay to do that.
I love that, Chris. I think it also implies there is some joy there.
Mhm.
Right. There,
Absolutely.
there is some joy to having your own voice and standing in your own authority,
Mhm.
as a point to begin from, with
Mhm.
community and family to support you.
Yeah.
I've been with APS for 9 years, and part of the investigation process for us is we go out and conduct an in-person visit with a vulnerable adult. I can't tell you how many times I've left after being at the older adults' residence for an hour, hour and a half, at the end of the visit, for them to tell me, like, thank you so much for just allowing me to share with you, for you allowing me to be heard. I mean, it tugs at your heartstrings, but it's so important for them to have a voice. And I just think in our society, in so many cases, that's just not the case.
I think it's that basic human need that we all have is to be heard. And as people age, oftentimes nobody wants to hear their stories. And it's a beautiful thing. And if you're working with somebody with dementia, maybe you've heard that story um, 20 times before. It's still opening yourself with curiosity and looking at that and listening with all intention because it's their story and you might hear something a little bit different. I love this question when how you age with attitude. It made me think of years ago. I was working with a woman in her 90s, and my initial session, she walked in, and I loved her energy. And her face was just lined with these deep, deep wrinkles. And in our society, it's like, oh, geez, I got to be ashamed of that. How do I hide it? Or how can I take care of it? I told her, oh, I love your energy. Oh, your face is beautiful. And she said, sweetie, these wrinkles tell the story of my life. And that will always stay with me. And she's no longer with us, but um, that woman left a huge impression how I want to age. Her kids wanted her to slow down. They didn't want her to travel. Basically, what they were trying to do was take away her self-determination and her autonomy. She wasn't somebody that you could do that to. She modified her life because she had some physical issues. She traveled in groups. She, had hired somebody to travel with her. But her attitude and zest of life, no, when you look at somebody like that, nobody is going to make that individual shrink or become quiet. Those are the kind of people that we need to try to be like, not let society define that our age means we have no more value or we shouldn't be doing the things that we still enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking just about the cultural shift of especially what it means to be an assertive woman or to be a bold woman and aging, you know, with boldness and attitude. For some of our women, and I'm going to speak from an interaction I had with my own mom. This was years and years ago, but my mom was really conditioned to be that as being assertive was being unkind. And I think that we need to also have conversation about when you're advocating for yourself or when you are being assertive, it's not that you're being unkind. You're actually being kind to yourself. And we were at the doctor's office and she was going to have her, it was an appointment for a knee replacement. And they put us in that room and we sat there for over an hour. And as the time kept ticking, I was like, Mom, I'm going to go and get the doctor. And she kept saying, no, you can't do that. Don't leave. She didn't want me to cause a scene. And I think I was like, Mom, I'm going to go get the nurse. And I had really listened to her for an hour, but I was also like, Mom, you're paying for a service. Um, and so when I went and they were like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. And they took responsibility it was a busy clinic that day. It wasn't intentional, but it reminded me for her being bold, being assertive, speaking her truth sometimes was difficult for her. And that was maybe that was generational. Maybe that was just the message that she received from her family. I will say it certainly wasn't the message that she gave me growing up because she wanted me to be assertive. It would just made her uncomfortable, right? So sometimes when we are talking about being assertive and bold, we just need to remind people that advocating for ourselves is not being unkind. It's actually being kind to ourselves, and that we need to do that more often.
I think a lot of us today in our 50s, 60s, 70s, we wanted to be the good girl, the nice girl. We didn't want to make waves. We didn't want to draw attention to ourselves. That's at least growing up, that was sort of what I was taught.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you build a lot of resentment and anger that comes out of that if you don't learn how to express your needs. And it's healthy, not only for you, but for the people you're in relationship with, for you to be able to say, I need this. I would like this. Can you support me? Versus holding that in and feeling the frustration and the anger that goes with not being what I would say is not being respected, right, for who you are. So yeah, again, and I think of this as both sides of the coin, me paying attention to others, but at the same time, me thinking about myself and how I live my life. So for the women that are listening today, or watching, what are some practical ways or things that they could do to protect themselves or support someone that they see as older and maybe vulnerable to this abuse?
Well, I'll jump in, and I think Angie spoke to this earlier, but I think education is so important. Establishing a support network and staying connected to that support network is also really vital. Identifying what community resources may be available if it's a situation where you do need some support. I think it's always important to be regularly checking in with loved ones, and having your affairs in order, designating a power of attorney, providing it to your primary care provider, creating a physician's order for life sustaining treatment if it gets to a situation where that's needed. Because I know we spoke to this earlier, but that gives you the ability to make a choice for yourself if a crisis situation does occur.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
totally agree. I think if when we're looking at your audience of women 50 and over, uh, we also come from a culture where women, we are the caregivers. I think that's changing over the years because men are really stepping up. I look at my son and the kind of father and how active he is in his family and in caregiving, in raising his child. But we still have that stereotype that women we are. And when you look at somebody 50, a woman 50, oftentimes she has adult children, maybe even younger children, and has a partner and still working. But if she has an older parent, chances are she's probably also being very supportive, like you were, Trina, with your mom. And so it's finding that balance, Lauren, like you were talking about, finding that balance of we can't be there for everyone. We got to still have time to take care of ourselves. And so those boundaries are important because if you spread yourself too thin, chances are you're going to be more short with those people in your life, like the elderly person or whomever. So you got to really be mindful of that, I think, just having realistic expectations of yourself.
Yeah, because that can also begin to border on neglect of yourself
Yes.
and of others. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
which we
And
want to avoid.
I would say really understanding like what your finances are and doing your regular check-ins to see where your credit score is, understanding all of, if something happens, whether it's to your spouse or whether it is a change in your employment or whatever, like we all need to know what is happening in our life because we're the stewards of it. And so when you think about the things that Chris was talking about on tangible things that we can do to take care of ourselves and to take care of others, um, I also want to remind people like to not forget about their finances. That's really, really important as we are aging, for sure.
Right. Well, if there was one message that you could leave with every listener or viewer today, what would you want that to be? And maybe Chris will start with you and then hear from each of you. What's the one thing you would want the women listening or watching today to take away from our conversation?
I think I would say elder abuse is everyone's problem. If you witness something that concerns you, please feel free to speak up. File a report with Adult Protective Services or local law enforcement, or as Angie spoke earlier, step in. Try to help them get some additional supports in the home, caregiver support, home delivered meals, in home services, those types of things. And just for listeners, the local area agency on aging will always take an adult protective services referral from you. You don't have to know that abuse is occurring or neglect is occurring or exploitation. It can just be suspected. If you've seen those indicators that something could be occurring, please reach out to your local area agency on aging and file an adult protective services referral, and we'll take a look at it if we can.
And we'll include some links to those resources and others in the show notes to this episode as well. But,
Great.
or Angie, your message.
Um, First, I want to say I'm glad that Chris, that you mentioned that you can make a report to your agency and be anonymous because I think that keeps a lot of people silent. Um, I just think that a healthy community addresses the things of their senior citizens. Community center, the education that you're doing today, wow, powerful, powerful. And the more that we provide that education and knowledge, I think our neighborhoods, our communities become healthier, and our attitude on aging hopefully will change. That's my hope.
I love it. I love it. And Trina?
Well, we've talked about so many wonderful things today, just raising awareness and about curiosity and being lifelong learners. And I would say I want to springboard off of what Chris said is making a report. It's really important too that folks know that here at the Ada County Victim Services Center, we're located downtown, so folks are able to come to the center. They don't need to have a referral or need to have an appointment. They are certainly welcome to come in. We're at 417 South 6th Street. APS is one of our in-house partners. But also, I would leave this message is that we don't see as many folks come in or make phone calls to the center to file reports or to access services. And what I want people to know is that we're here for you. We're here for your neighbor. We're here for your mom. We're here for your dad. We're here for you. So if you have concern, to please reach out. You can call our phone number at 208-577-4400. I know that abuse and neglect and is occurring in our valley. And we would really want people to know that you can access service here and you can certainly access service through APS. And that we have a lot of resources in our valley to help support our aging population. Sometimes it's a treasure map with no X on it, right? But the only way we get the X on the map is by having open conversation and really talk about the reality of our aging population. So.
Well, and we will include all of the contact information for those resources in the show notes to the episode as well, so you can look for that. I would say just from my own point of view, when it comes to this idea of aging boldly, I would invite and encourage everyone listening to really have a vision for yourself as you age. Sit down
Mhm.
and decide, how do I really want that last 10 years, the last 15 years of my life to look like? And
Mhm.
then what do I need to do to create that? I think doing that would empower you beyond belief to have a joyful and happy old age, as they say. So that would be my biggest message to everyone listening is to consider that and to play with that.
Mhm.
I want to thank each of you, Chris,
You.
Rena, Angie, thank you so much for being here today. I am so grateful that you gave your time to have this conversation. You shared your wisdom with us, your knowledge. And I also totally appreciate the work you do every single day to advocate for the safety, the dignity, and the well-being of older adults in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. What an honor.
You,
Thank
yes,
you.
total honor.
Yep.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank
And
you.
my pleasure. And to everyone listening today, I hope that this conversation reminded you of something important, that aging does not reduce a person's value, it does not diminish their humanity, and it never removes their right to safety, respect, voice, autonomy, and care. Sometimes awareness begins simply by paying closer attention, by noticing, by asking questions, by believing someone when something feels wrong and they share that with you, by being willing to speak up. As we move forward in the month of June and recognize World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, may we continue to create opportunities for our older adults to create the lives they want for themselves, where they are not ignored, they're not dismissed, isolated, or exploited, but that they are deeply valued for the lives they have lived and the wisdom that they carry. If today's conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing this episode with someone else. These conversations matter, and awareness can truly make a difference. You can also find the resources that we've talked about today, the support, information support, ways to connect with these agencies and groups um, in the show notes. So look for that. They're there. And if you're new here, I would love to invite you to stay connected through subscribing to my Substack, the Your Next Chapter blog, and the Unscripted and Unstoppable podcast. I write, we speak about identity shifts, reinvention, relationships, healing, and all the things it takes to be happy and joyful as we age. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until next time, please be brave enough to keep becoming who you are. Thank you.